Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it? I'm either going to get lots of "you're a DA shill," or I'm going to get a lot of like, "why do you hate the DA" type comments, because this video is predominantly going to be around the DA and a lot of the things that the DA is doing. But before I can get onto the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It really does help. So let's get onto the first one. The first one is really important because it's around the Firearms Control Amendment Bill of 2025. Now, all the information I'm about to convey to you actually came from Ian Cameron, and Ian Cameron pointed out that the government's trying to push stricter firearms controls, despite their own research showing that these laws don't reduce crimes. Now, Ian Cameron referred to the CSPS VITS report, which he described as suppressed evidence. Now, the actual report says that the original Firearms Control Act of 2000 showed no demonstrable correlation with reductions in violent crime, and you couldn't show a causal link between a reduction in crime and firearms controls. Now, he says that the actual report showed that declines in gun violence historically occurred when SAPs were functioning, not when laws tightened. I mean, who knew? It's just revolutionary to think that actual policing stops crime. Wow. And not gun laws that take guns away from people. Now, according to Ian Cameron, the Central Firearm Register is described as technically collapsed and institutionally incoherent and incapable of maintaining accurate records. And it's that register that's actually problematic. Now, he says that state firearms, not civilian firearms, were a major source of weapons for criminals, and he highlighted that more than 26,000 guns had been lost from SAPS and the SANDF between 2004 and 2014, with a recovery rate below 35%. So he's saying it's actually the state that needs firearm controls, not the law-abiding individual. Now, according to Ian Cameron, he said that the CSPS, that's the report we're referring to, warned against fear-based narratives and policies captured by ideology rather than actual data. Now, Ian Cameron says that over-regulation actually alienates compliant citizens. That's you and me, individuals that actually get a firearm license, and this includes hunters, sport shooters, security professionals, and collectors. Now, the new bill wants to do some really balmy stuff. The first is that they want to limit ammunition to 100 rounds. And there must be exceptional circumstances for self-defense licenses, and it's going to be subject to bureaucratic control. So some bureaucrats in the government is basically going to tell you whether or not you actually have a legitimate reason for self-defense. And 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to go, no, you don't. So you're not going to get your license granted. It's going to be completely subject to the whims of the individual reading it. Now, Ian Cameron says that more bureaucracy layered on top of a broken system just creates more breakages in the system. And so his view is that the bill itself prioritizes political theater over safety and ignores government-commissioned research proving that these gun controls do not reduce crime. Now, Ian Cameron basically says that we need to scrap the bill. And so the DA itself has actually set up a website called stopgunbill.co.za, where they are inviting you, members of the public, to go on there and submit, as part of their campaign against the bill, your name saying you don't want this. So please do go check the link out in the comments section below. Now, talking of the DA and the ANC, new research has come out from the Social Research Foundation, which shows that the ANC is polling at 37%, and they're actually down now, 9 points from 2021, 3 points from 2024. And the DA is up at 32%, which is up 10 points from 2024. Now, most noticeably, the MK party is now at 8%, 7 points down from 2024. The EFF is at 7, the IFP is at 6. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because the ANC and the DA are now only 5 points apart nationally. Now, polling from the Social Research Foundation has historically been accurate. So this isn't just whims or best wishes. Now, 52% of voters believe the GNU will succeed, and we're going to talk about that in a second. DA supporters themselves are the most optimistic, with 61% saying they believe in the GNU, and of that, 56% of ANC voters think that the GNU will succeed. So even the ANC voters want a GNU. In any case, in terms of the policy trust gap, well, the best policies remain, according to this research, with the DA at 30% saying that they've got the best policies. ANC is only at 22%. Incredible leadership, well, we'll talk about that in a second. The DA is at 28%, with the ANC at 17%, so Cyril is no longer popular. In terms of broken promises, well, 73% associate broken promises with the ANC, whereas there's only 3% associated with the DA. And in terms of favorability, well, Ramaphosa is currently at 38%, 6 points down. Helen Zilla is at 29%, and John Steiner is at 26%. He's actually gone up 8 points. So the narrative ultimately from this research shows that the DA actually has real momentum, and the ANC legitimately continues to erode its voter base. Nobody really trusts the ANC, and that's well warranted. Now, voters increasingly trust the DA inside the GNU, and I suppose it's thanks largely to the stopping of the shenanigans that occurred at the start of the GNU, where everybody was trying to undercut each other for positions of power. Now, talking of positions of power, we must talk about the internal war going on in the DA, specifically between John Steenhuisen and Dion George. So what actually happened? The DA's federal executives sent a major dispute between the DA leader John Steenhuisen and Dion George, the federal finance chair, to the Federal Legal Commission, the FLC. They're arguing over a default judgment which actually occurred against John Steenhuisen for 150,000 Rand, unpaid on a personal credit card debt, despite his ministerial salary. Now, it's alleged that John Steenhuisen abused the official party credit card on takeaways and personal spendings, and so they're saying they want to hold him accountable for his rogue spending. Now, accusations have actually been made against Dion George, and this is that he had poor performance as the Minister of the Environment. He had been gallivanting on international trips, and he was unprofessional in his behavior. So what has the party said? Because so far it seems like a dispute between two individuals. Dion says that John is misspending on the company card and that he's got this unpaid debt, and John says Dion's a useless guy and can't do his job properly. So Helen Zilla actually issued an injunction to stop fighting in the media. And unfortunately, this has become the DA's mantra. Whenever they are very upset with each other, they do generally tend to take it out of the media for everybody to see. Now, the Federal Legal Commission is going to investigate potential breaches of the DA Constitution and its internal rules, with serious internal credibility potentially damaging the DA right before the DA's strongest polling year in history. And this is what the DA constantly does, as it's gaining momentum with self-sabotages. And in this instance, they're self-sabotaging with leadership. Now, it should also become unsurprising that another thing is occurring in the DA, and that is that there is a DA constitutional reform to centralize power away from the FedEx. And this is because, to a large degree, many individuals argue that the FedEx has been captured by Helen's. So what exactly is being proposed? Well, the DA wants to change its constitution away on 4 key principles. And this is basically an allusion to what's going to go on now in South Africa going forward, specifically around coalition governments, because the DA, in the first instance, actually wants to change how coalition decisions are made. They want power to approve national coalitions to move from the FedEx to the Federal Council. This will effectively take that responsibility away from Helen. Now, the motivation, they say, is to avoid conflicts of interest amongst FedEx members who hold government posts. and to create transparent, stable rules after chaotic metros like Johannesburg, Tshwane, and the Nelson Mandela Bay. Now, there is a reason for this, and this is because Helen doesn't like Gayton Mackenzie. And just because of that, they have not been able to secure coalitions in numerous areas around the country, which has forced Gayton to learn how to work with the EFF and the ANC. So, yeah, there is that. Now, the second thing is that they want broader representation, because at the moment, FedEx is, well, to a large degree, not really very representative of the party. Now, the Federal Council includes representatives from provinces and grassroots structures, and the idea is that they will ensure coalitions have a broad democratic mandate. The third point that they want to change is the principles for coalition governments to a principled agenda, with clear measurable objectives for GNU participation, with objectives jointly developed. And the fourth is a new deputy federal leader position. Now, this would effectively act as a leader if John Steenhuisen resigns or becomes incapacitated. Remember what we've just spoken about with John. And this would assist in national campaign, strategy, and media work, and would strengthen leadership continuity. Now, the bigger picture ultimately is that the DA is preparing for long-term government in the GNU and is seeking institutional reforms inside itself to avoid destructive factionalism, ultimately which could be caused by, well, Helen Zilla. And that brings us on to our next article, and that's around Helen Zilla. Because Helen Zilla is warning that the coalition, the GNU, probably won't last until 2029. Now, key ANC leaders oppose the GNU from inside. They don't want it. The GNU's stability depends on the ANC leadership race in 2027, with potential successors being Paul Mashtile, Fikile Mbalula, and both are unpredictable coalition partners. I mean, neither of those two are a fan of Zilla, so whether or not they can actually work with her, who knows? Now, if the ANC actually leaves the GNU, they could align with Malima's EFF or Zuma's MK party. Both demand nationalization of mines and banks, which would terrify markets and collapse the economy. Now, in terms of the actual investor sentiment, now the current Rand rally, the Rand's improved by 9 points, driven partly by belief in GNU stability. And that would collapse the market gains like almost immediately, so we would have a run on the Rand. Now, Helen does say that corruption remains institutionalized in the ANC, and that in itself causes problems with working with the DA. Because the DA doesn't want that corruption, the ANC does. Helen also referred to the government's mismanaging of the relationship with the US and Donald Trump, with Donald Trump claiming that white genocide was occurring in South Africa. Now, Helen actually clarified her position on this, that farmers face violent crime, but not genocide. She also talked about BE enrichments and how it discriminates against minorities and how that was a contentious element with the DA and the ANC. So the underlying message really was that South Africa's stability is hostage to ANC internal politics, and the DA doesn't want to capitulate to the ANC, and that ultimately over time may mean that the next leader who comes in just doesn't want to work with the DA. According to her, having all these changes in the FedEx to change the constitution to somehow have better coalition decisions so that they can work better in coalitions, and according to her, ain't going to be one because the ANC is probably going to sabotage it. Now, on to a very last news article, and as we've referred to Trump, let's refer to AGOA. Because US Senator John Kennedy introduced a new bill entitled AGOA 2.0, which aims to extend AGOA for 2 years, but will exclude South Africa due to geopolitical misalignment with US interests. Now, the new bill would require that AGOA is only extended for countries aligning with US domestic and security interests, and that any bilateral trade negotiations must prioritize pro-US Africa states. Now, the inclusion of Kennedy's earlier US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act, which aims to review South Africa's ties with China and Russia and determine whether South Africa undermines US security and produces a classified sanctions list of ANC and South African officials underneath the Magnitsky Act, and with the intention of explicitly removing South Africa from AGOA eligibility, basically means it's not looking very promising for South Africa and AGOA, with the renewal likely to occur, but excluding South Africa. Because this actual senator has now introduced 2 acts to tackle South Africa directly. Now, let us not forget that the US government was in shutdown, and this meant that a lot of these negotiations and these bills didn't actually come through to the House because they couldn't do it. They were in shutdown. But now that they've gone back, all these things are now coming to the fray. So many individuals had thought, well, the US have forgot about it. Ain't forgot about it. They just weren't there to talk about it. Now, the White House, as of today, currently supports a 1-year AGOA renewal. But Kennedy's bill is a Republican hardline response. And this comes days after South Africa attempted to embarrass the US at the G20. So what's actually going to happen? Well, we'll see. I mean, this is the 3rd major Republican move to punish South Africa for alignments with China, Russia, Hamas, and all its anti-US foreign policy positions. And let's be honest, if they keep introducing bills, one of these are bound to get passed eventually. So I think the writings on the wall is going to happen at some point. Anyway, these are just my opinions. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comment section below. Are you happy with the DA? Sad with the DA? Are they actually going to do well or not? I mean, personally, I've seen the DA over years, and I've interacted with them for years, and they always trip at the last hurdle. Will this time be any different? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, until tomorrow. Bye.